Hello and welcome to yet another episode of EduTech Podcast, a series of podcasts produced by us here at Microsoft, where we discuss and explore education best practices alongside exceptional and experienced industry guests. My name is Denis Kürtü and I'm the Education Marketing Manager for Microsoft in Central and Eastern Europe. And in my role, I'm constantly engaging and supporting students, teachers, and all up educational institutions and entities to digitally transform the education environment with solutions that are meant to improve student success, augment teaching and learning through the use of digital and cloud, and accelerate research. Luckily, I'm not all by myself here. In this episode, I will be joined by two education professionals, very interesting and experienced people that I look forward to talking to. We have with us today Antonis Muhtaropoulos, Dean of Digital Learning at Metropolitan College, right? And we have with us as well Sherban Nicolae Meza, which is our Associated Professor in the Technical University of Cluj-Napoca. So, gentlemen, very happy to meet you. Allow me to start by thanking you for accepting our invitation to partake in our podcast and to showcase your stories. And before we touch base on the actual topic of today, which is physical campuses and their role in this new paradigm that of hybrid learning and online learning, I would invite you to share a bit about yourself so our viewers can get to know you better. I'm going to start with you, Anthony.
Thank you, Dennis, for the invitation. Hi, Serban. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm Antonis Muhtaropoulos. I'm the Dean of Digital Learning and Educational Technology at Metropolitan College, which is actually the largest private institution in Greece, comprising 8 campuses across Greece. My main role involves the organization and delivery of our digital learning strategy across all of our campuses, as we do collaborate with 7 universities across the globe, and basically all stakeholders, including students, staff, and educators. What we're trying to do is align all of our stakeholders towards our digital education strategy. And I'm happy to be here and discuss with you hybrid learning environment today.
Awesome, sounds interesting. And what about you, Sherban, the Technical University of Cluj-Napoca, right?
Yes. So hello, Dennis. Hello, Microsoft. Hello, Anthony. Nice to be here today. I'm part of the Technical University of Cluj-Napoca, as you said. It's one of the largest technical universities in Romania, more than 16,000 students, and I'm part of the effort of becoming digitally, let's say, functional as an higher education institution. I'm both a professor and I'm teaching students, but I'm also involved in all the efforts that are inside the university regarding how we can make digital more and more of the processes here, including the admission process and including the way we interact with the students on an ongoing and continuous basis, not only when we meet physically, but also virtually.
So if I were to kind of draw a sentence from what you gentlemen just said, Antonis, you're handling the digital strategy of the university and digital distance learning, right? And I would go ahead and ask what technologies or how are you approaching this? What technologies are you leveraging to provide distance learning? How is this working for you? How is it working for the teachers, for your students? Just give us an overview of your environment so we understand what you're doing there and how it is perceived.
Well, moving to a more digitalized world as far as our educational scheme is concerned was part of our strategic decision, actually as part of our executive committee decision. So what we wanted to do is asking not only what students need to know, but what they need to do with what they know. So part of our strategic scheme is to provide our students a network of higher education industries so that they're able to fulfill the digital learning pathways and the digital learning journeys. So at the moment, we're providing a blended learning scheme, actually hybrid learning environment. This is why we did deliver and we did sign a memorandum of understanding, an MOU with Microsoft across 12 sectors about 6 months ago, so as to enhance and strengthen our students' learning journey. At the moment, we're utilizing Microsoft Teams as far as the online part of our learning journey and our learning delivery is concerned. But we're currently utilizing a number of dozens of different digital learning educational tools to enhance employability as well as to personalize the learning journey of each one of our students across all of our 8 campuses.
Right, amazing. Thanks for sharing that. Using technology, to my opinion, it's augmenting the process. But just by touching points with technology every day, you get a lot of data points of interactions of users with technology, so you can explore that, as a big data concept and do a lot of things with it. So I'm very passionate and interested about that. I would move to briefly to Sherban, and you mentioned about the admission process. Perhaps you can talk about that a bit, and anything else, like what's your favorite project or the project that you feel that resonated the most with the university and the students?
As Anthony said, I think it's an approach which you can see, and we took it also. The fact that you want to digitize the process, and more than wanting to digitize it, exposing and making a journey for the students and the teacher, which is enhanced technologically. So we went and had the similar experience in approaching, and especially accelerated by the pandemics with Microsoft Teams and using technology to basically be able to meet. And now we are exploring the way we explored, and we are still exploring and going forward on the ways of how we can use technologies for leveraging internal processes. And one of the processes that we tried was the admission process, in which we wanted to have a fully online admission process. And wanting to have it and then delivering it, it's a different story. And what Microsoft came into being was their cloud services, because basically it took out a thing out of our mind in terms of where am I going to have the necessary infrastructure for that. It's the first time I'm doing it. Do I have enough? I mean, if this was a matter of making it in-house, then you'll have a budget and you were never sure if your budget and the hardware that you have would be enough. But with cloud services, I think this was a very nice experience, was the fact that you didn't have to think about that, because you could scale up according to what's going to happen in practice. And this is what we learned during this summer, where we had the admission process online, but instead of having it on-premise on hardware, we had it in the cloud services. And I think probably more and more of the stuff that we have are going to move there, because we can basically decide whatever we need on an ongoing process, rather than plan and then execute and then rethink, and then it's too long a loop.
Very, very happy to hear about that. And I'm very happy when people actually use and get the value of technology. And you were mentioning scaling and scalability, cost savings, ability to build your own solution without having those constraints. Very happy to hear that. And I see we're talking online admissions, online or hybrid learning. Pretty much everything is more or less online. And I would like to challenge you, gentlemen, with kind of changing the topic a bit, switching tracks, and asking you, in this online environment, what's the role? Where do you see the campuses the university campuses playing a role in this new paradigm, and what is that role, and how can technology further support that? So maybe going back to you, Anthony.
Well, obviously, there's always the concept of a connected campus nowadays, of a smart campus. So how can we better connect our campuses, and how can we connect all stakeholders within the whole process, so that we engage students more, so that we offer a more engaged, more integrated, with increased accessibility, such an environment. Obviously, the incorporation of digital services, AI services, IoT services, it has already led to significant benefits on some campuses on our aid to increase learning outcomes or mechanisms nowadays. But that does not automatically mean that we're more engaged with students, that the whole environment is more integrated or with increased accessibilities. As obviously now students have got a different range, a different palette of options, from either the fully traditional mode or to a fully immersed online learning mode. In my humble opinion, I believe that we're heading towards a more personalized, a more campus-based blended learning scheme, so that our students will be able to learn in their own pace, to be much more flexible, much more accessible, so that we can offer all of our students the same experience. The actual instruction being online with support being face-to-face at local centers could be a method that we can fully support this method I was mentioned earlier on before.
I would like to comment on that. I think that yes, there is a future for the campuses because we humans are social and we need physical interaction. I was very aware, and all the university here in Cluj was very aware after the pandemics, where we would able to see the fact that people were actually eager to come back to school to meet physically. And like Anthony said, what we are seeing in nowadays is the fact that teachers are not that afraid of using technology. It's not something that is a realm where young people play and it's their world. It's a world where we can meet. And I think that, for instance, with Microsoft Teams, kind of connecting everyone else, you have this social engagement, physical social engagement in the campus, and then you have a means of having a one-to-one communication in Teams, in the virtual environment, where you can, as a student or as a teacher, divide your attention from the mass to the particular person. And the virtual environment allows you to have this, let's say, uniqueness of the channel and the feeling that you are important, because the teacher, you can contact the teacher, and the teacher will respond to you, and you're having a one-to-one channel. And I think that with Microsoft Teams and Office 365, this is something that is kind of standing out now, maybe other tools as well. But once you create this as a future campus, I think the physical campus is still there to stay, because we need to be physically there.
So the more we use technology, and we're not at a point in time where we can afford not to use technology. So the more we use it, the more data we generate. And we're accumulating this data, and it can be anything from admission. And when I'm talking we are accumulating, it's not us, Microsoft, but it's the customers that use the technology, right? You have an online admission process. That means all the data that represents a student in this admission process will get collected. Then you use Teams and other tools to do online or hybrid learning. So the students and teachers are using technologies, and each use of technology will leave a footprint there, will leave a data point of what happened. So this generates a lot of data, right? So my question to you gentlemen would be, have you thought about consolidating this data and getting some value out of it? How do you see this part where you have all the data about the students' track record during class, during courses, during seminars, right? Because it's online, and you have this statistical data, and others. Like, how would you think of leveraging this data to further improve the education process?
We should leverage data both from a proactive to a reactive role. So from gathering data from the admission process for each student individually, so that the data would carry on together with each student throughout their own learning journey. And of course, it's much more important to complement this type of data with the students' in-house university-based learning. How they do communicate, as Serban said earlier on before, in a connected campus. How engaged they are. How much they do connect with other peer or fellow students, how much they do connect and interact with other educators. At the end of the day, what I believe that this data should be leveraged on about is personalizing the journey of his students, so that data becomes knowledge at the end of the day.
Data becomes knowledge, and it helps improve the learning outcomes. Really, really interesting approach. And I would stick with you, Anthony, for a little while, because I know you have a lot of projects there running with Metropolitan, and you get some nice awards for the good work that you do. And I'm specifically thinking about the award from British Council. Would you like to share a bit on that? What was the project about? What was the award about?
Yes, of course. It's the Digital Transformation Excellence Award in higher education sector, which will be given to us in due course within the next weeks by the British Embassy and by the British Computer Society as part of an outstanding level in digital excellence. And this will be awarded within the next weeks, and it was a part of a portfolio we did submit a few months ago as part of our ongoing projects. And this was part of our digital transformation effort so as to enhance all processes within our institution. And Microsoft was pivotal in this part, as what we try to do is digitize our supporting resources, library resources, counseling center support resources, academic learning center resources, etc. We utilized Microsoft Bookings in this regard, for example. That's a good example, if I might mention it, a good practice on our behalf, in which we did utilize Microsoft Bookings so as each student was able to pre-book or to book either online or face-to-face a private appointment with a tutor, with a lecturer, with a librarian, etc. And this obviously removed the barrier between the student and the university, and hopefully made it easier for students to resolve any issues they might have.
That is one attribute of technology. I guess the three of us didn't get to experience not having this technology back in our days, where the teacher was the teacher that was sitting in front of the classroom behind the desk, and the kids were over there, the students. As with technology, it's so much natural and easier to communicate and to share information, and it kind of bridges this gap, and I find that fascinating. You did mention, Anthony and Sherban, you did mention a lot of digital transformation projects that you did, from admissions to teaching online to using bookings to all the things that you mentioned. All those points, my question to both of you would be, what changes have you noticed in your institution, in your education environment, after implementing those changes? And it can be anything from students and teachers' feedback, from usage of technology, from lower bills with electricity, just trying to draw a line after digital transformation and see how that improved your overall.
I think there were several. I mean, you mentioned some. I think there are even more. We put the copying centers out of business because people no longer had to do zero copies of their courses and so on, because now you could share them as a file, and you have a tablet and you have a laptop and you read it electronically. So we make the world a better place by using less paper, if you want. Another one would be the fact that by using technology as a teacher, you kind of lower yourself from behind the desk, are more approachable to the students, and you're also not being able to use, maybe as a teacher, so not being digitally native shows a bit that you're also human, so you can be approachable from the student's perspective. What we've seen also is the fact that we are, especially in the cloud part and the Azure services, the fact that we are starting to not consider so much of a problem the fact that as a public institution and a state subsidized institution, you cannot attract talent in terms of system administrations, because you simply cannot pay the amount. You are probably 2, 3, 4, 5 times less in terms of budgets than a private company. So this would be a concern, because and then when you have Azure and stuff like this, you don't have this problem of attracting and keeping talent for system administration, because basically you have this as a service, you have the platform as a service, and then you can focus on finding solutions and working with third parties that will deliver solutions that will work and will not be dependent on the fact that you have a system administration or a hardware a huge investment beforehand on which you can host that particular. Once it's working, you have to host it somewhere. How do I plan for the next 5 years the servers? You don't have this anymore. And I think this is a way it changed the approach of the higher management from this point of view. And probably this change in the higher management perspective on digitalization will probably see in the future, this is my hope, a much agile, if you want to use the term, approach in terms of implementing digital services anymore, because there is no such a higher barrier of entering it.
Yes, I agree. It's kind of democratizing, although this word is being used a lot in these days. It's democratizing, facilitating the access to technology by making it human and easier and simpler to use. And I would explore a bit that angle that you shared, Sherban, with how technology works in an education environment. And I know for a fact that the university is a very lively environment. It's a very engaging, and a lot of things are happening, many projects at the same time, many different stakeholders, and there is the need sometimes to work with external partners, right? To work with external providers, outsourcers as well. And I think we can start seeing another cloud solutions attribute here, where by looking at how resources are being handled and managed in Azure, and how you can provide access and specific access to specific resources, even timestamps, so on and so forth. I think this is also another way how we can support education and universities by bringing in this external component, right? And I think you were mentioning in our previous discussions, maybe you can
Yes. So, for instance, in our admission process, it was a very nice idea, the fact that we could involve with a third party, but in a way in which, for instance, you have Azure as a portal where you have resources, but you also have Azure DevOps, where you can implement easily a continuous integration, continuous developing pipeline, where the third party will develop the code for you. You will have access, you own the code, you no longer buy licensing, you buy a software which is live, because you have to be live. You cannot no longer have a solution and interact with your students with the same, just referring to a graphical user interface, with the same graphical user interface more than 1 year. You need to change something. It doesn't mean that you have to change the way it works, but and then with this approach where you have software ongoing, always software changes, Microsoft DevOps helped us have a quite trustworthy relationship in terms of understanding and knowing that the code is there. If the third party will change, and you can change the third party whenever you would probably are forced, most of the time you are forced of the equation, you are not locked out, because you still have the code source there. It's still configured to run on your subscription if you want. So you have also a control over the costs that is running. And then if depending on the choices that you have on the technology used for development, you can find another third party to substitute if God forbid, anything happens. So this kind of re-gives the power back to the university in terms of controlling, and this is what we've learned. And I mean, we learned. I don't think we learned. I think we just gained confidence. We regained the confidence that if a third party is being paid and it's collaborating with us, and everything goes nicely, you have the code source, and if everything happens, then you can find another one, just take the development where it was and then go on forward. You don't have to cut everything out and restart, which used to be the way of working, because when you change, it was a huge problem of changing the supplier for a particular system. And with this, you kind of, I mean, it's a boost in confidence. I think it's the best way to put it. It's a boost in confidence. The fact that you have Azure DevOps, continuous integration, continuous development on an Azure subscription, that you can control the costs of how much you want to have there, and what performance you want for your environment in the interaction with your students, with your teacher, or whatever. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's exactly the philosophy behind it, and I'm very happy that you've explored and you've reached that, and it's working so nicely for you. I'm very happy for that, and thanks for sharing that very nice overview. I would switch to Anthony Antonis for a quick sec, and maybe repeat the initial question is, after deploying so many digital transformation tactics and strategies in your education environment, what do you feel has changed and how?
Yes, well, I'm echoing most of the points raised by Sherban, which means are amazing regarding their own institution. Our main concern when trying to implement our own digital transformation strategy, exactly as Serban said, is that the digital literacy level of students and educators were not such given. A wider range between all of them, between educators themselves, between students themselves. So our basic aim is to try to shorten the gap between students themselves and between educators themselves. So what we try to do by utilizing a specific and a unique SharePoint site in that was to educate students and staff so as to bring them into the same level as they can. So this was our primary goal to begin with throughout our transformation journey. This was the main change we did notice in our own institution, as we wanted students to be flexible enough to be our strategy and our offerings to be accessible enough and adaptable enough. And it definitely, what Serban was saying earlier, I can echo on that as well, is that it has opened humanness as we got to know students more, we got to know educators more, get to know their own families in many ways, get to know their pets, get to know their houses, etc. And this has brought all of the communities together. So it's a different take on the technical part we discussed earlier on before, but I believe that this has brought all of the communities together within their own institutions.
This technology that people are usually blaming for separating us and kind of siloing us and keeping us distantly social, right? It looks like there's another angle to it. Using it in education and using it in this perspective, it actually brings people closer. It brings them, together in ways that wouldn't be possible in other scenarios. Very happy for your stories, gentlemen. Absolutely inspiring to see that those stories come up, and this is why we're doing the podcast, because we want to share this inspiration with other educators and technology leaders in universities and in other education institutions. And thank you for sharing all of that. To that, I would add, if there's something else that you feel worthy to share or you feel bringing up before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think that the general approach would be, I don't think that Microsoft is simply for education. It's the fact that is also in the industry present and in our home life kind of makes it easier. I think it's nice that we showcase it that is also in education, but I don't think it's just for education. I'm looking forward to have some of the other projects that we have in the pipeline. For instance, applications for students, like portals in which we are going to be able using again features of Azure, especially for interconnecting databases that will hopefully allow us to provide the students one single entry point into the data that we have about them and they need. Because now we have, I don't know, a management system for the library, another management system for the dormitories, another management system for the grades, and so on, which work nice. But however, the student has to log in on several. More than logging in, it has to access them separately. What we are hoping and to leverage as a future, I think we are looking into the features of Azure and Data Factory and how we can grab this all, wrap this all, and then deliver them in a maybe something like a dashboard for them, rather than, because this is what's happening here. So this is future plans. And lastly, thank you, Microsoft. I think it's thank you rather than anything else.
Thank you as well. Thank you for using and showcasing and coming with us in those projects. Back to you, Antoni. How do you see this process moving further? What's your takeaway and what are your future plans with Metropolitan?
We're also proud to be working very closely with Microsoft along 12 different sectors. So we're currently focused on using data, on using specific insights such as artificial intelligence to provide and guide learners in personalized and bespoke pathways in providing a lifelong learning journey. action, and so as we can create valuable educational content. And this is why at the moment we're building using Microsoft technologies and mixed reality laboratory using HoloLens so as to enhance students' learning and provide a different educational experience. This is part of our strategy as well, and we're looking forward to that. And I'd like to thank you, Dennis, Serban, and Microsoft for the valuable insight today.
I wish I could be a student again, to be honest. I think it's exciting times to be a student, to be a teacher, to be a researcher, or even if you're not that, you might be, fortunate as I am and at least work close to education and to universities. I think that's great. And I think we're at the time where technology can really step up the game. We're at the time where the use of technology can facilitate, accelerate, and modernize the processes around education. The idea of education itself as a way of communication and sharing information, right? And while it's doing all that, it's also collecting a vast amount of data that we can take a look at after a while and understand even more of what we've achieved by doing this kind of digital transformation. So to all of you out there, you've heard it from people that are working with it, that have deployed it. It's hands-on for them. It's on a day-to-day basis. I hope you have the inspiration now to go back to your education environments and maybe you caught an idea and you start deploying that and start using that. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you and talking to you, and looking forward to your future projects.